One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to Security Guy Radio. I'm Chuck Harold.
Paul Bristow.
That's Groovy Detective. You like that song?
Yes, sure. No.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Well, today we're going to talk about stalkers. Stalking, stalkers, to be stalked, having been stalked, and so on. A subject you and I both know well.
Yes.
So,
luckily, not personally.
You had a stalker once.
Nah, not that I can remember.
Yeah.
It wasn't that good.
Oh, wasn't? I had a good one. I had this woman at Fox who worked in the tape vault and wanted to work on the X-Files. And she kept trying to get a job there, trying to get a job in the X-Files. And somehow she figured I had vexed her, or whatever that term is, and she put a hex on me.
Quite rightly, too.
No, she was a self-proclaimed witch. She went around saying she was a witch. And started sending me these letters, and then I got some kind of weird mojo voodoo curse put on me. Letter. It was very strange, very strange. So
Is that why your hair's grey?
That is why my hair is white,
White,
actually.
yeah.
Yes, white. And then we had our databases, right? So at Fox and Disney, we both had databases of how many? What do we have at Fox?
We had there was about 3,000 people in that database, subjects.
Yeah.
So we had about 600 cases a year. It was at the time, probably still is. I think one of the best programs around.
Yeah, one of the biggest collections too.
Yeah.
Disney,
yeah.
we had something similar, and I think between the two databases, we probably had, I don't know, 5 or 6 people we did not know who they were, because most people identify themselves. One of the psychologies behind stalking is to make sure the victim knows who they are, right?
It is,
It's an ego thing. It's a power thing, control, all those kind of things. So we actually worked on the data elements for LAPD for their database.
Yeah.
They use that now to kind of gather information on this stuff. It's kind of interesting. LAPD, I think, started the first
Threat management unit.
And then other places, and like
followed
them, and then other people brought in.
Well, it really grew out of the Rebecca Schaefer
exactly.
Killings at Warner Brothers.
Yeah, we had that one guy that was trying to make it was a 50 caliber.
He was trying to purchase
silencer?
a 50 caliber gun to.
That's right. Buy a 50 caliber rifle with a silencer
to shoot a talent for one of the shows.
Yeah, and he was on the internet talking about it, like in chat rooms, like it was no big deal.
But we caught him.
Yeah, we did catch him.
But you're right. There ain't too many from the talent side that don't really tell you who they are. There's very few and far between.
Yeah, they make it. We had a guy that was sending about 3 letters. When I say 3 letters, I mean 3 separate envelopes with 2, 3, 4 pages of handwritten text on it, front and back.
Yeah,
I can't even say it on the air because it was pretty weird stuff. But he kept sending this to the talent on the news, and of course she made the mistake of signing a photograph and saying thank you, and then he automatically fell in love with her and kept doing it until he was arrested eventually. But he kept writing her from jail too.
Yeah.
And that went on for at least 5 or 6 years. The good news on those kind of cases is that when they keep writing the letter every day, that's good.
It's the same MO. As long as the MO doesn't change.
Yeah, and one day
the issue.
Yeah, this guy stopped writing one day, and then we started worrying because now we don't know what he's going to do.
Where the hell has he gone?
Where'd he go? Yeah, and he turned out.
Is he on his way?
And that's right. That guy from Canada that was trying to come down. He actually told us he's coming from Canada.
Yeah. He had all the kidnap for a certain talent.
Yep.
And he had a van full of kidnap material basically.
Yeah.
And we managed to arrest him in a gym in LA where he threatened to kill the gym.
Oh, the gym. That's right. I remember that.
That's right. It was very interesting.
But
just in time, actually. Just in time.
But what do we know? We only do a radio show. We don't know anything, which is why we constantly turn to our experts, like our first guest today. Actually, it's our exclusive guest today. Ms. Kathleen Baty, she's the CEO of Safety Chick Enterprises. She started SafetyChick.com after being the victim of a kidnap attempt at gunpoint by an obsessive stalker. And after 15 years of living like a hunted animal, she came to the realization that living weak and in fear was going to destroy her if she didn't turn the negative into a positive. So she started SafetyChick.com. Did I mention the website, Paul?
No, you didn't.
SafetyChick.com.
Okay.
Make sure we get that. Kathleen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. All your stories sound like 15 years of my life.
Oh, we had, Paul and I were very lucky that we had that experience. I can't think of any other companies or businesses that have that many people, and we had that experience doing it.
I think what helped us as well, our boss at Fox as well was very supportive of the program, and plus the fact we had the at Fox, we just didn't have the studio, but we had the whole broadcast side and 50,000 employees. So, it was a pretty busy
Yeah, but you know
program.
what, Paul? I mean, I started being stalked in 1982, 83. So, at that time, there was no word for stalking. There wasn't even a word for the behavior.
That's
Right.
true.
Think about way back when. I mean, you guys are talking Rebecca Schaefer. That was 90. That's when I was kidnapped. But I had to live 15 years before that with this cat and mouse game. It was a guy that I had gone to high school with, but I had no relationship with, and he didn't start stalking me until my junior year of college. I went to UCLA. And really, the police said, look, until he lays a hand on you, there's nothing really we can do.
Yeah.
And so, over the course of time, I had to learn every possible aspect of personal safety and crime prevention and how to keep my personal information private and how to, secure my house inside and out and how to really work with law enforcement to manage my case. And I know we'll get more into that, but I wanted you. We talked about doing the show before. I've known both of you, but Paul for a very long time. And the beauty is January, is National Stalking Awareness Month. So it's great that you guys are focusing on this subject because I still think, even though it's been highly publicized over the years, there's still a lot more information that needs to get out and a lot more awareness of people and the crime and better how to protect themselves.
Kathleen, how long did the behavior, put it that way, from your stalker go on?
Well, every time, my first incidents escalated very quickly. It started from a strange phone call and hang-ups. I was visiting my parents up in the San Francisco Bay Area for Thanksgiving vacation, my junior year of college. And it just started, it was a weird phone call. He said he was somebody that he wasn't, and I didn't really recognize the voice. And literally the next day, it started escalating into calling every 5 minutes, hanging up, till later that evening, me coming home from a date at my parents' house. I got out of the car first. My date got out behind me. And this guy, my stalker, came out of the bushes behind me with a knife. That was our first encounter.
Right.
And I, my date got out of the car, and once he saw him, he jumped in his truck and took off. But, that was... that escalated very quickly. Later, we ran into the house and called the police, and we got a phone call from him literally 5 minutes after he drove off. He called my home phone, and my friend picked up, and he said, tell the big guy I'm going to kill him. This was my date.
Yeah.
Tell the big guy I'm going to kill him. I have 180 rounds of ammunition, and I'm going to blow him away. And my girlfriend said, look, Kathleen's going back down to UCLA tomorrow. Why don't you just leave her alone? And he said, well, we still have tonight, and she's not going to make it back down there.
And this was a high
so
school...
that literally was all happened in one day.
And this was a high school acquaintance who
Yes.
hung out silently for many years and then all of a sudden jumped in.
Exactly.
Started engaging.
And so what happened later that evening is the police went and waited across the street for him, and sure enough, he came driving by, and they did the big police chase throughout the city, pulled him over on the other side of town, and he indeed had 180 rounds of ammunition, a semi-automatic weapon, and loaded clip under his seat, and cassettes. Now, I'm sure most of the listeners understand what cassette tapes are.
Well, you don't know.
Don't. But he had bullets stuffed into cassette tapes, the whole thing. So it was quite dramatic, his first, my first encounter with him. And literally, so at that time, all they did was keep him in for a psych hold, 72-hour psych hold, let him out, and that was that. And
Wow.
then 3 months later, we don't have a week to go over all this, but I'll just, get to the chase. Three months later, he showed up again. He had broken into my parents' house, got my address, went down to UCLA, couldn't find me there, drove back up. He luckily was arrested out in front of my house there and put in on probation for 3 years. And then that's kind of how it went. It was a cat and mouse game. He would come find me, bring semi-automatic weapons, bring guns, and I would narrowly escape. And then he would be picked up and put on, I would get a restraining order. That's all we could do at that point. And he would be arrested for violation of restraining order and put in jail for, a maximum of like 60 days and then 3 years probation.
Wow. What year were you at UCLA when this was going on?
It started my junior year and went on. He was arrested 8 times before the actual kidnapping in May of '90. So, I started being a victim in 82 and continued to be a victim, until 90. Well, actually 94. So, again, there were no laws on the books that made his behavior a felony. It was always a misdemeanor. So it was very difficult to keep him behind bars for a long amount of time. And truthfully, if you have been a stalking victim and have lived in fear, the only time you ever really feel like you can let your guard down is when your stalker's behind bars.
Did you ever think that it would sort of end?
Say that one more time, Paul.
Did you ever think that it would end, or did you think that this would be an endless?
Well, no. I mean, early on, you go through so many phases. First, you live, it's denial. It's like, no way is this happening, And then, you think, oh, this is really going to get it. He's going to go away this time. But I have to say, after I don't know, probably about the fourth arrest, I figured, no, he's not going away. And, basically had to learn all through. I went to UCLA. I was a cheerleader at UCLA. I was an actress and a dancer down there, and was really trying to live my life as normally as possible. But let's face it, I lived most of my young adult life looking over my shoulder and living in fear with that gut-wrenching feeling of, oh, is he coming back? Oh, where is he? And it takes a toll. It truly does.
Well, it's not unusual for these things to happen, as people might think. Listening to this story, I'm sure there's a lot of people would say, oh, I had a friend that had something like that. I think what's important to understand is, how do you know you're being stalked? You might not have called it stalking because there wasn't a word for it. It's easy to define that now. But I've known many people, women. There was one of our clients, internal clients at Fox. Remember, she had the phone calls on Thanksgiving. Yeah. And make a long story short, I said, it's got to be an ex-boyfriend. She said, no, it turned out to be her ex-fiance from 15 years earlier, who just started calling her on Thanksgiving because that's when they broke up. He moved from Arizona with her. He'd been living down the street from her in Santa Monica for 15 years and photographing her. And when we went in her apartment, it was a whole wall, like, from Law and Order, right? Yeah. Of all the photos of her as a victim. It freaked her out. But I think that stuff's not uncommon. We do know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, that it is in the lower percentage of unusual that people show up in person, like Kathleen's case. They kind of stalk from afar. They might call. They might write phone calls and letters. But when somebody does show up in person, that's a very, very serious matter because it's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. Most people don't show up.
And you know what? The other thing is, because I've, of course, working in the stalking industry for so long, I really think that there needs to be a separation, a clear definition between domestic violence stalking and stranger or acquaintance stalking.
I agree.
Because...
I think there's, the typologies that are coming out now, I think do differentiate, pretty well. Now, the problem is, does everybody recognize that, the difference? There's law enforcement and, the people that aren't in the industry, as it were, actually recognize those differences. That's
the greater danger, I think, might be the domestic relationship, where there was a real relationship, and that's more volatile, whereas the guy that thinks he has a relationship, you as a victim may be off guard by that, thinking it's not serious.
Well, and you handle it differently, too. I mean, we're talking about domestic violence versus stranger stalking. Yeah. So there could have been a pattern of behavior there and whatever, but you're right. I mean, all of it is dangerous. All of it needs to be, you need to manage each case differently, though, depending on the relationship. So in my case, and I've taught this for years, the way to stay, you're going to back up for a second, Chuck. What you were saying is, how do you know you're being stalked?
Right.
I get asked that question all the time, right? And I say, you are being stalked the moment that person makes you feel in fear for your safety.
Is that too late, though, to get to that point?
Well, the contact, we're dealing in an even more dangerous time now, if we're going to move forward into the whole cyber stalking and all of the different, apps and things out there that stalkers can use to get personal information where virtually, so you'd never even know that you were being stalked, which is very scary.
Right.
But it's about truly building a perimeter of safety around you virtually and physically so they don't have that access.
Oh, I agree.
That's what kind of everybody needs to be aware of. That's personal safety 101.
Oh, yeah. 5 minutes on the internet, I can find most things about most people. People don't realize that. They think, it's all protected. No, you're out there. You're out there. Everybody's out there. You just have to know how to find it.
And with all the, all the different spyware and malware and all of it is just, it's horrifying. So you really have to be diligent about caring about your personal safety. And that's really my business, is really making everyone or helping everyone to truly understand that to live free and safe and empowered and confident, you need to care about your personal safety and take steps to protect yourself so that you don't become a victim in the first place.
Yeah, one of the big things I saw recently was some of the social media sites that are actually giving the location of photographs that you take.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's some cases now occurring where people are actually locating their targets, as it were, because of where they've just posted from.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's it. You have to be so diligent because I've written a couple books on for adolescent girls, for women's safety. I mean, that's the bulk of my business, and it's just you really have to be diligent constantly with Facebook, with Twitter, with all the different social media sites, that you have the proper security settings because they change them all the time.
Yeah. Kathleen's going to tell us how to do that and how to be safe when we come back right after this break from Security Guy Radio. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio with Chuck Harold and
Paul Bristow.
And our special guest, Kathleen Baty. Now, Kathleen, we have to take a little brief pause because I always tell some stories at the beginning, and I was neglect to not let Paul tell his funny New Year's Eve story. So go ahead, Paul.
Well, it's not really funny.
Well, then what are we telling it for?
Well, it's ironic.
Okay.
You know how I like irony. But
right.
I don't know if you saw, did you see the fireworks display from London?
Yes, it's always the best.
Absolutely beautiful,
Yeah.
30 minutes, whatever the hell it was. The irony of this, and you know why I bring this up, because we've got relatives who are in the fire brigade, etc. in London. The irony is that the firework display cost £10 million.
Okay.
And last week, they just laid off 550 firemen, closed 10 fire stations at a cost of £28 million over 3 years. So if we have 2 more fireworks displays in London, it would have paid for all the firemen that have just been laid off in the London Fire Brigade. It was just very ironic.
Well, that's not a bad segue into our next topic, by the way. Funny you should come up with that, because it's about what? Bureaucracies, governments, laws. And Kathleen, when this all happened, there were no laws. But you did something to make that change, right? I guess you worked with the Congressman Ed Royce and got some laws passed.
So, again, the police kept saying, until he lays a hand on you, there's nothing we can do. Or I had police saying, shoot him and drag him onto your property.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but, anyway, but I'm not I'm not a big fan of that, pretty much. I let somebody else do it. I don't want to see it. But the thing was, I was actually in May of 90. I had just gotten married and moved back to the Bay Area. And he, my stalker, had just been arrested in January of 90 for a violation of restraining order. He was seen out in front of my house. And so he was thrown in jail for 4 months for a violation of restraining order. He got out in April. I was married in April. I just got back from my honeymoon, and my ex-husband played for the Miami Dolphins at the time, and he had to go back to spring training. So I was home alone, basically. And this is the beautiful thing, that seriously more work needs to be done on stricter parole conditions and probation conditions, and I'll tell you why. So my stalker was on probation, and I got a call from his probation officer because over the years, I learned how to become my own case manager, you see. Yeah. I learned how to work with law enforcement. I learned how to keep a journal, to keep the dialogue, to keep the track and all the evidence and all of that, and we can talk about that later. You can go to my website and see it. But
is that website safetychick.com?
Safetychick.com.
Well, make sure we get that.
Email me on there if you have any questions or need help. If you're being stalked and any kind of questions or information that you need. Anyway, so I got a call from his probation officer saying that he was missing, he didn't show up for his appointment, that he was acting despondent, and to be on the lookout because he really felt that he was coming back after me. Now I will tell you that probation officer saved my life.
And that was
Had I not gotten that call, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Well, did you ask for that call, or is that just something?
I did not ask for the call.
Oh, interesting.
But what I did was I always would get the name of the probation officer or parole officer and check in with them.
Wow.
And I always asked, how's he doing? How's it, and I know that's a violation of his rights, and right now it is, and I want to be able to change that, because the bottom line is, what's different about a murderer or a sex offender or, some other kind of criminal, with a stalker, when they get out on parole, you don't know who their next victim, if they are going to have one, is going to be, right?
Right.
But with a stalker, you know who that victim is. So I believe when a stalker is on parole or probation, that we as a society and with the agencies have a duty to protect that victim while the stalker is out and free. Because as we know, there's different volatile points. There's different trigger events. There's different times that they're going to be more volatile. Well, listen, sure thing when they're just getting out of jail or just getting, off parole or whatever because their victim, they got put away because of that, they're coming back after that victim.
I agree. There is an absolute affirmative duty on that. And law enforcement, correctional people, listen up. This is very easy. All you have to do is this. You book John Doe the stalker. You put him in jail for 5 years. You set up your little database on Outlook, and you literally can use Outlook, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not kidding. And you put Kathleen's name in there, and you put the date 5 years from now when this guy gets out of jail. And when he gets out of jail, on that date, Outlook automatically will send Kathleen an email that says, hey, your stalker just got out today. Thought I'd let you know. Have a nice day. It's that easy. Why we don't do this, I don't know.
It is, but, here's the twofold on that. A lot of victims are so afraid to give their personal information to anybody in the system.
That's okay. We can set up a fake address on Yahoo. Nobody's going to know about it. It's easy to do.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I will help. Let's do it together.
Let's start a business.
I've been getting the guys in ATAP to do this, to form together and do this forever.
Well, that's your problem.
This is a piece. Oh, yeah. We just like to go to Disneyland.
Kathleen,
anyway.
How many times has this guy violated the restraining orders?
8.
Oh, my God.
But remember, Paul, here's a big factor. Restraining orders are great in certain situations, and as you know, as a threat assessment professional, restraining orders aren't always the answer. For instance, I don't have a restraining order right now because I would then have to tell my stalker where I live.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Good point.
I don't want him to know where I live.
Right.
I keep my personal information private now. But for the instances where they know and they keep coming back, and you're trying to get them convicted of stalking, to prove a case of stalking, you have to prove a laundry list of behavior. The number one thing being that you have communicated, I want no further contact of any kind with the person.
Right.
And number two, getting that piece of paper, that restraining order in place so that police have a way to pick the guy up.
Now, we had emergency restraining orders when I was a cop. It was kind of a new thing in the 80s. And they were effective for the guy, the ex-husband, the boyfriend shows up at the house. It's 3 a.m. and everybody's pissed off, and you serve him there, and you take the girlfriend to mom's or a hotel, and it stops that. But there's two schools of thought. Restraining orders can actually agitate your suspects, right? And personally, if I got a restraining order, the message to me would be, I don't think so. I have a high testosterone level. It's not going to work on me. So you got to be careful. You got to
be really.
You got to think these things through.
You're absolutely right.
You got to think it through.
You have to assess every case.
Assess every case.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
For my situation, now remember, he wasn't. We're talking about getting somebody arrested for the crime of stalking. So in order to get someone arrested, again, you have to prove a laundry list of behavior, right? That's why you as a victim have to manage your own case. You have to go down and file police reports each time because it's the paper trail.
Yeah.
And so the part of the restraining order thing, for me personally, my stalker already knew where I lived, right? So I needed a way to get him off the street. Because the only way to truly feel safe and stay alive as a stalking victim is to stay one step ahead of your stalker and to have the means to get him picked up and off the street. So I totally, of course, every situation is different, and you have to manage each case differently, and you have to weigh, the good and the bad of getting a restraining order.
How did
For
you
me
work?
Personally, at that time, it was the right thing to do.
Well, I'm assuming then as well that the stalking laws weren't really in place.
Well, that's
for violations
it. That's where we were going.
That's
Sorry,
an issue.
I ramble.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
tell us
the
about
point.
Congressman Ed Royce and how you
All right,
put some
so
laws in the book.
after, it's kind of a good story. I came home at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I turned around, and he's standing behind me with a knife in my home. And
now, wait a
because
minute.
I had been planning this again and again and again for so many years, the first words out of my mouth were, "Sit down, I've been expecting you, we need to talk."
Oh.
And that completely threw his power, and I just started talking to him like he was an old friend from high school, and, you know, things just kind of naturally progressed. My mother called. I picked up the phone, and, you know, she would ask me a question, and I would answer something completely different, so she figured out that he was there, called Menlo Park PD, who had already arrested him several times and were very aware of the situation. Then police dispatch called. I talked to her like I was trying to, at the time I was selling real estate. I was trying to sell her a house on Cloud Avenue, and she was able to get a lot of information out of me, like where is he standing, does he have a weapon, blah, blah, blah. She said the police are on their way, but you need to get outside. So he wanted to, at that point he wanted to go up to the Trinity Mountains, which are, you know, the mountain range on the way up to Lake Tahoe. He had a cabin there that he wanted to go and spend the weekend with me. And so I finally said, okay, you know, let's go. And we walked out into my garage, and he had rope laid out and his coat. I don't know how long he'd been in my house. He tied my hands up, and he said, now don't run and don't scream, and he pulled out a gun.
Oh.
So, yeah. So at that point, it was pretty much an out-of-body experience at that point.
Now, this is when you're married to a NFL linebacker or something.
He was a tight end, but yeah, exactly. But he wasn't home; he was in Miami.
And apparently, that did not deter him, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
Just remember.
See, that's the thing. I mean, delusional people are not deterred by, you know, they if anything, they would see them as a threat, and they would, you know, I'm glad no one was home because it could have gotten very violent, right?
Right.
So you never know with that. They have no fear; they're just delusional. So we went out the front gate there. My car was parked in the driveway, and I looked around, and there was no one. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, I'm on. If I only I'd waited 5 more minutes. So I was kind of backing out of the line of fire, and down at the end of the driveway, a cop came and drew his gun, and I laughed, and Paul's heard this story. He said, you know, freeze or I'll blow your effing head off. And I remember thinking, oh, my God, they really do say that. Like But anyway, he didn't freeze. He had put the gun behind his back in his belt. He pulled the gun out, but he didn't point it at the cop. He pointed it at himself, so the cop didn't shoot him. From
please.
there, you know, but remember, this is Northern California. This is
that's
Texas.
true. Not
you know
real policemen. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, cops surrounded, you know, us, and I noticed a cop in the far corner waving to me to run to him, and I shut my eyes and sprinted and hurdled the picket fence with my hands tied and landed into his arms and, you know, got to this, you know, made it out of there safely. And he kept him at bay on my front porch for the next 11 hours, threatening to kill himself, and finally was able to be, I think he was tackled by SWAT that had snuck up behind him. And long story short, he went off to prison for 8 years, 10 months for attempted kidnapping.
That's not attempted.
Because by law, he didn't take me enough feet.
No. Who is the district attorney up there? Kidnapping is moving somebody 5 feet with the intent to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it was Fox. It is Fox, and unfortunately, the assistant DA, and this is my beef as well. The problem with assistant DAs is they've got a stack of rape and murder and all kinds of cases on their desk, right? And they're just going through. And remember, this was not stalking. There was no prior. They could not know any prior history. This was purely of that simple event. They had no knowledge of the prior event.
But it's still straight up kidnapping.
Attempted.
No. When he tied your hands and moved you, the act is done. Anyway, we have the take a break music, Kathleen. So give me 2 minutes. We'll hear some more sponsors, and we'll come back. I want to hear more of this story. It's fascinating. We'll be back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. Brian, very groovy music. I'm not sure it's happy stalker music, but it's a good tune nonetheless. Kathleen, welcome back.
Well, so we should have had something a little bit more serious.
Well, it is happy safety. Well, but it was a happy ending.
But yeah,
true. She won. She became.
It's a happy ending.
Yeah. All right. So Knucklehead gets arrested. Does only 8 years for attempted kidnapping.
8 years, 10 months. He was out in 4.
Oh,
for
excellent.
Work time, good time.
Oh boy,
yeah. That's a whole other show.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do another show on that. People are fascinated by this.
Did he ever contact you from prison?
Not from prison, but this is where the other show comes in. After those 4 years, he was on parole with strict parole conditions. he cut off his monitoring bracelet and took off. And at the time we were living in Florida, no one knew where he was, and we were taken into protective custody by Fort Lauderdale SWAT, and he was arrested 8 days later gambling, trying to get more money to get to Florida. That's a whole nother parole probation discussion down the road.
You know, I actually dealt with an issue at Fox. A woman who I'd known for years, actually in the same office building as me. She came down one morning and said, you know, I just want to let you know that 15 years ago I was attacked by my husband, and he shot me 6 times, and he's been in prison up in Northern California, and he's just been released today, and he's phoned and said he's on his way down to kill me.
Oh.
And after I stuck my body armor on and all the rest of the stuff, I actually did some research, and sure enough, you know, everything she was telling me was true. And he was actually arrested after sexually assaulting a couple of kids that he'd shacked up with the mother that night.
On his way down.
On his way down, he had a couple of weapons, etc., etc., and it was going to happen. I mean, this guy was coming down. So,
you say an important thing there. You know, the only way, and again, we don't have enough time to go into it, and I would love to come back and examine the whole parole and probation conditions. The only reason that I was able to get, you know, protection and all of that, because remember, what happens to violent felons when they jump parole? Well, they're only caught when they commit another felony, right?
Right.
So if I hadn't, you know, I called Ed Royce, the U.S. Congressman, which we haven't even gotten to yet, and he actually said we can't let our poster child for stalking get murdered by our stalker. So the Attorney General at the time, Dan Lundgren of California, is the one that put the violence suppression unit in place that tracked him down. Because if not, I was a sitting duck, right?
Right.
So to back up, so yes, I was kidnapped. He went off to prison. I was contacted by Ed Royce, who at the time was a state senator out of Orange County, California, because the Rebecca Schaefer murder had just happened. It was all at the same time. And my story was in the paper a lot up here because it was just such a notorious story. And so he contacted me and said, listen, we are trying to pass the nation's first stalking laws in California out of Sacramento. And I'm getting opposition because, you know, Republican, Democrat, all that BS. And so he said, would you be willing to go up and testify in front of the state Senate on behalf of the law and just calmly, you know, go through the last 8 years of your life? And I said, I would love to. And he said, you're the only stalking victim that I know of that is still alive.
Oh, that's interesting.
And to me, that was
a little
quite
bit
poignant.
Worrisome, though.
Well, I just had a, not recently, but, you know, when I was at the company that shall not be named, got a call from somebody who used to work at Culver City PD, and they just wanted advice. You know, I got this phone call from this guy, and he wanted me to go out. What's unusual about that? Well, I only said hi to him once in college, and that was 15 years ago. I said, you have a problem. Get a journal out, start recording it. And did she do that? No.
No.
She thought it was all innocent, not a problem, until then he started calling on anniversary dates and all these kind of things. And to this day, I'm not sure she's really done anything about it. There's a lot of denial going on in that. And it's,
and you know what? And that's, too, why I started SafetyChick.com, because everything I'd ever read about personal safety was always so negative and daunting, and I hate the way that media portrays personal safety and crime prevention, because we as women, don't respond to fear. We respond to fear by living in fear or being in denial, and that is not the way that we should be living our lives. We should be positive and proactive, make smart personal safety choices, and, you know, it allows us to live a very positive and empowered life.
That's
and so that's been my mission, because I know the difference between living in fear and living positive and empowered.
So what can some victims do to protect themselves from becoming these victims? I suppose identification and definition is the first thing they got to do. They got to
well, the first thing is let's not even become a victim. How about that? How about really taking the time and really being diligent about keeping your personal information private, limiting who has access to your personal information? I mean, I have aliases. I don't let any bills come to my house. I mean, I don't have anything listed in my name. That's what I'm sorry, in this world of technology, to truly stay anonymous, you have to take these measures.
It can be done, but it takes a lot of effort, but it can be done.
A lot of diligence. It sure does. But it's just kind of practice. It's routine. It's like anything else. It's like paying your bills. It's like, you know, driving a car. It's doing your work. It's just, but it's so important. in this
well,
day and
a lot
age.
of it's
It just
common
is.
sense now, isn't it? Actually, I mean, some of it's a little bit hard, but a lot of it is just common sense.
I kind of disagree. Here's why.
Yeah.
You're on Facebook. You put all your things private, all your settings private, let's say. But let's say the stalker, and not most of the time, but sometimes they know somebody you know and so on, right? Remember, in order for Kathleen to be completely safe on Facebook, everyone would have to be on board with her setting their privacy settings. But I can go in and look at 10 or 12 of your friends. Once one of your friends accepts my friendship, I then have access to your page if your settings aren't correct. And I can guise your life through the eyes of your friends. I can see where you're going.
Well,
Kathleen was just tagged in a photo, and she's down in Santa Monica.
But again,
because you have to set the setting to say, I have to approve anything.
But most people don't do it. That's my point.
Well, but that's what
Right.
I'm saying. It's common sense. You don't see that on my Facebook page.
Yeah, but if you put common
Right.
sense in a
Now-
bottle,
now
we'd
on
be billionaires.
Your Facebook page, you're telling everybody where
We
you are.
only see
I'm a
your
public
naked
figure.
pictures on
I'm
the
a public
Facebook
figure.
page.
I have to. My public wants me. What can I say? No, in all seriousness, you do have to think about those things. My 14-year-old niece, is always checking in with her girlfriends to say, "I'm going to sleep now," and she keeps her GPS on, and
Yeah, it's
there's her
crazy.
house.
Absolutely
Of course.
crazy.
Yeah, it's wacky
But
stuff.
that's okay. So that's where parent management comes in.
Yep. Are you
You know, it's
listening?
just-
Are you listening, Sister Joey? Listening to the show? I hope she is.
But I'll tell you that, I mean, that's one of the things that really worries me, actually, is you see that all the time on Facebook, is people showing where they are,
Oh, it's a
and
big
it's
one.
not only from the stalking issue or whatever, if you want to get your house burgled, guys, anybody out there, start posting on Facebook telling everybody that you're on vacation at the moment.
Now,
Okay?
Well,
Kathleen,
I think we can preach until the cows come home about
Exactly.
keeping your personal information private and knowing it. But really, you have to grasp the concept that the internet. Everybody thinks the internet is anonymous. I was hired by ESPN to train all of their on-air talent after Aaron Andrews had been stalked. And I mean, trust me, these grown men are still making the most stupid decisions of what they're doing on social media, right?
Right.
So it's not just kids, it's adults as well.
Oh, yeah.
And they think that the internet is anonymous, and it's absolutely the opposite. It's like putting a magnifying glass times a billion on you. And so until people understand, look, treat your Facebook, treat everything else with discretion. It's personal.
well, not to give anybody any ideas, but if you're internet savvy like I happen to be, you could literally create a little not a Facebook, you could create a web page that really isn't registered to anybody. But if you started a Google ad campaign and I put in your name, Kathleen, anytime somebody typed in your name to search for you, I'd get a link that showed this address on this computer searched. And eventually I would be able to crack that address for that computer and find that location if I knew what I was doing. There's so much stuff out there that you have to be so careful about. And I agree. It is absolutely the most public place in the universe is the internet. So you got to start there to get that stuff.
And it's out there forever and always.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it really, because I've seen some services that claim they can wipe you off the internet. True or false?
I have a great story for you. So my best friend is a reporter for ESPN. And they were trying to get, she didn't like, some stuff. She just wanted to, monitor what was on the internet. And, the service reputation.com?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a service you can pay. It's like LifeLock. It's like all that stuff. And they do the web crawling and they get the stuff off. Well, for $30,000, they were going to, assist her in getting some of the things off. And there's no guarantee. Exactly right.
Yeah.
But no, that's a scam. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not buying it.
Yeah, there are probably some things you just talked about that you do yourself by not engaging these things. Eventually, you go to the end of the search engine on page 5,000 at Google. Nobody knows who you are.
And, the thing is, articles written about you and stuff, hey, if you choose to be out in the public eye, you got to choose to not care about what somebody writes about you. I mean, that's the point. You have to have thick skin.
Years ago, I worked on a case with a talent at Fox, and somebody had actually, and this is what we're talking about, articles and all the rest of it, they'd actually put together a complete bio on this person, and a lot of the stuff that they'd given out, names of their kids, and they'd just slipped it out somewhere in an article. It was amazing what this chap had actually put together.
Yeah.
I mean, even for me, and I'd seen a lot by that time, it was pretty amazing the amount of time that this person had spent.
Kathleen, do you recommend creating personas on the internet?
In terms of like bills and services and things where you have to trust a minimum wage employee to keep your personal information safe.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if you come out, this is what I say: your middle name and the first car you ever owned.
Or your middle name in your street. Isn't that your?
I know, but it works a little better. I've done it both ways, and it's more fun to do the car.
That would be more fun.
It can either be your porn name or your alias, but it can also be your assistant. When you call up for reservations, you can pretend you're Paul Bristow's assistant, and you can get like a better table at those Hollywood restaurants that he goes to.
Well,
yeah,
let me give.
possibly.
Here's a little tip for everybody.
McDonald's.
American Express will issue you a credit card in anybody's name if you say, "Hey, American Express, send my Paul Bristow credit card."
Yeah.
Not necessarily have to be a relative. You're responsible for the bill, of course. And then with that name, you can now break away, start a separate credit account, and you could literally start a whole new identity in theory on that. Not for anything illegal, but there's ways to do it. You just have to kind of be clever. But I suspect, do I hear the music playing, Brian? I think it's coming. I suspect safetychick.com may be able to help us with that. Is that correct, Kathleen?
Yes, and
Okay.
my book, A Girl's Got to Do What a Girl's Got to Do, and my second book, College Safety 101, Miss Independence Guide to Empowerment, Confidence, and Staying Safe. Chronicle Books named it, not me. But
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk to Kathleen about what she can do to help you guys with this. Back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio with Chuck, Not a Chicken Harold, and Paul, You Bet Your Bippy Bristow. Kathleen, you still there?
Yep.
All right, now, we have, what do we got, like 10 more minutes left?
Something
like that. Yeah. So, Kathleen, this is all you and your expertise right now. I want you to tell everybody how we can get a hold of you, how you can help people with this.
We've
Because
got to answer that question, though.
Oh, the question from Brian.
Yeah.
Brian, my engineer, has a good question. What was this guy stalking you all about? Was he after marriage, sex, killing you? What was his end goal?
Boy, wouldn't I like to know.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but here's the thing. As we know with the different, typographies of stalkers, there's the simple obsessional, the love obsessional, erotomania, all that. You never really know. I've heard through law enforcement that interviewed him saying that, he was the typical loner, divorced home. I guess mother was a druggie, lived on the street. Father physically and sexually abused him as a child. So, the perfect setup for this kind of delusional behavior. And I guess somehow in college or high school, I was nice to him. He was on the track team with me. And so years later, when I guess he got fired, things started to go bad, he thought of, who's the one person that was nice to me. And I guess my face popped into his head. And so, a lot of times these guys or women, whoever, are delusional, and they put somebody, they don't know them, but they, like the Brad Pitts, like all the erotomania stuff, they put somebody up on a pedestal and think, if I can just get with that person, all my problems will go away. Now, I have two older brothers, and once they got wind of it, they both said, well, just date him one time, let him get to know you. He'll never call you again. But
uninformed advice.
Yeah, very sound advice. That's maybe why I'm single. Anyway, the point is, you don't know. I have no idea. And the biggest thing is, please, victims, do not feel like you've done anything to warrant this behavior. And that's it. I mean, it's a very, very difficult and horrifying thing to be stalked. I mean, that adrenaline, that pit in your stomach, if you've ever felt it, at any moment, any kind of fear, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, something has happened in your life, whether it's narrowly escaping a car wreck or going down the street and feeling like someone's behind you. It's that zing of adrenaline. Imagine that times 20,000 living day and night like that. It's awful.
Well, and the adrenaline can have physical effects on your body, that you're constantly in an adrenaline state of fight or flight. It's a serious matter.
It's one of the things I've always told people that are victims is don't try and read into these people's heads. Don't try and think about it, as though it's logic.
Well, even if they have a stated reason,
never work it out.
You can't even
never
accept a stated
reason. Work it out.
Yeah, and the other big thing is, as threat assessment experts, there can be no contact with this person of any kind. You must stop all conversation unless it's, like for me personally, I knew that my way out was going to be talking to him like he was my friend. Every situation's different, but you don't, listen, you want to avoid all contact. You certainly don't want to be in my position, right? But the thing is, these people are delusional, so whatever you're saying to them, whether it's F off, I hate your guts, don't ever call me again, or, gee, you're nice, they only hear what they want to hear.
What do you think it brings up a question, what do you think the biggest mistake that a victim, a target makes in these cases? Is there one thing that sort of runs through the cases?
Not taking it seriously.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
And not taking the proper steps to, put the surveillance camera, put the lights, build that perimeter of safety around you virtually and physically, and be aware and manage your case.
And be aware does not mean be paranoid. It just means be aware.
No. In fact,
you gain power from having control over your environment. It really is empowering.
And listen, I can honestly speak to it because I've lived both sides. I was the victim, and now I'm quote-unquote the expert. But what I'm saying is I know how to not live in fear. And you know how that is? It's taking control of the situation and taking the little steps necessary to protect yourself and help be your case manager. So instead of, cowering in the corner, sucking your thumb, shaking, worried that he's coming at you, no. Stand up, put your shoulders back, learn, education, knowledge is power. Go down to the police station, find an advocate, and learn how to take care of yourself and get a team together because it helps you get your power back, and that's the most important thing.
Let's do this. Let's create a scenario where, and you and I know this is true. We all know this is true. There's somebody out there listening that has the guy that called on Thanksgiving, all melancholy from 5 years ago, and says, "Hey, I'd like to see you. Let's go on a date." And the woman is going, "But we never went on a date before. What are you talking about?" Let's start with a simple situation like that, and you and I both know it's going to escalate. But before it escalates, speak to that victim through the radio and tell them step by step. They just got the phone call. If you were sitting in their room talking to them, what would you tell them to do?
Number one, I would try to obtain as much information virtually about that person. If you have their name, if you know where they work, if you know where they live, try to get as much information on that person as possible before you sever. And then, document immediately the conversation and what went on, because believe it or not, you forget. You kind of, and then when, any kind of emails that you get, immediately you have to start saving and documenting so that you can be clear. You can be clear about what's going on and be able to assess, right? So a lot of times you do get a phone call and it doesn't feel right to you. Number one, always listen to your gut. Always. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being smart. So if that person, and I have to tell you, that first phone call I got from my stalker, I had that gut instinct, like, this is not right.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel right. So pay attention to that. But also start your little investigation before and know where he's living and have as much information so that you know where he is and he doesn't come up and surprise you. It's the ones that you don't know where they are that are scary.
Well, this is
because
a good.
as you say, you kind of lay in wait, and you don't want to. You want to be proactive, not reactive.
I think this is a good point. This is very important for victims to listen to, because when you take the time to go buy one of those little, composite books you get at Office Depot for $1, and you write down what happened every day, create a diary, so to speak, and you go back and read that 3 months from now when it's escalated. Hopefully, you have evidence, but as you write it, I think it becomes real in your mind that something's wrong here, because emotionally you can just dismiss it and say, he's just kidding around. I don't have to worry about it. You write it down, you document it, you start engaging it. I think it becomes more real faster. That's my
totally
opinion.
agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Right,
because we do this, you doubt yourself because of society. Society teaches us to doubt our gut instinct. Oh, you're just being paranoid. So we give other people way too much benefit of the doubt. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so we got some documentation. They have the hair standing up in the back of their neck now because they listened to you and said, boy, this guy fits these profiles. They started writing stuff down. I'm frozen now, Kathleen. Now what should I do? He hasn't called again, but what should I do?
Here's the next question. Is he calling again?
Yeah.
Is he going to call you again?
Let's say he's calling again, yeah.
All right, if he calls again, say, look, I always say little white lies. Personal safety is personal. It's what makes you feel comfortable saying. So if you want to say, hey, listen, I'm really uncomfortable with you. Don't call me anymore. I don't know you. This is making me feel uncomfortable. You can say that. But if you feel like that might escalate him or whatever, then say, hey, look, I'm married. I'm in a relationship. I have no interest in dating. I'm really committed to something else. I'd appreciate it if you didn't call anymore.
Does it work sometimes?
Well, it doesn't matter if it does or doesn't, because here's why. Here's what weeds out the stalkers from just a regular guy looking for love. If the guy hears you say, I want no further contact of any kind, and they keep calling and contacting you, you got a problem.
Well, you expose specific intent in his mind. States
Exactly.
it right there. Yeah, exactly. All right, so what are we going to do? Are we going to get the cops involved right away? Maybe not?
Okay, so then he's calling me again and he's emailing me again? Yeah, I'm going to go down and ask very nicely for the detective on duty and just explain that, here's what I think, here's what I know, give them a little background very concisely, and that's where your little composite notebook comes in. At this time, this happened, at this time. Believe me, cops, police are our friends if you approach them the right way.
Correct.
Think of how many people they engage with on the street. It ain't pretty. Let's be honest.
That's true.
So a lot of times these nice law enforcement police officers don't always have the best patience and bedside manner. So you have to understand that, and you think of it as a professional way of doing business, not emotional. When you're engaging with the detective or a law enforcement officer, be professional and concise.
And not emotional.
They will pay attention.
Not emotional, I must say. I think that's important. I hate to say it, but we have about 2 minutes left, Kathleen, so I want to make sure we get through this pretty quickly. So we're engaging the cops. Do you recommend telling your neighbors, telling your cousins, telling the whole family that you have a problem so they can help you?
It depends. It depends on who this person is. If this person is, a friend of the neighbors and blah, 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 again, it's a question of keeping certain information private so that you can best deal with this stalker and not feed him information.
Through your friends or connections, feed him information.
Exactly.
Inadvertently.
But you're right. In terms of a neighbor saved my life twice because I went and had a headshot after he was, arrested a couple of times. I got home from a business trip, and my neighbor said there was someone trying to break into your screen. This was in Marina Del Rey in 2000
interesting.
In the 90s. And I said, hang on a second. And I went and got his mugshot, and I came down, and I said, does this look like the guy? And he said, yeah, that's him. How'd you know?
Well, Kathleen, unfortunately, I have the fade out music playing. So I want you to give your website. How can we get a hold of you? I think a lot of people are going to want to call you and engage you to help them out.
Well, that's wonderful. My website is safetychick.com, SAFETYCHICK.com. And I just came out with a whole new line of products, Safety Chick kits, that are going to be distributed for retail this next year. They've got date rape coaster, test coasters, pepper spray, personal safety alarms, door wedge alarms, so check it out.
All right, excellent.
And you got to come on again?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah. Next time you're in
I'll
LA.
come down there in person.
Absolutely. When you're in LA, stop by and we'll put you in the show. Kathleen, thank you very much. This ends another edition of Security Guy Radio with Chuck Harold and
Paul Bristow.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next Monday.